morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Scottish Police Authority meeting at the Clayton Hotel. We have no member apologies. The Chief Constable has had a long-standing personal commitment and sends apologies for today, and Deputy Chief Constable Designate Jane Connors is here to lead Police Scotland's input, supported by Deputy Chief Constable Alan Spears and Beck Smith, CFO James Gray, and our HRD Katie Miller. It's a requirement of our code of conduct that members declare any financial or other interests and connections in relation to the business for today. Do any members have any declarations of interest or connections? No. Members, can you confirm at the moment, and I recognise there may be some later on, any other business that you're anticipating to be taken today? No. So in terms of decisions on taking business in private for items 10 to 11, in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders, I'm asking members to confirm their content to take item 10, the private minute of the meeting, held on the 26th of June, for approval in private. Item 11, we had expected an update on our 26-27 budget. That's been withdrawn in order for further work to continue with Authority and Police Scotland input provided at our Budget Development Group, with formal governance anticipated by Resources Committee and or our full board in due course. So that paper has been withdrawn. And then item 12, an update on pay and reward, was initially anticipated that we would be considering that in private. But given our recent communications and the Chief Exec's update, I propose that we take this item in public at the end of our public session. So are members content that we take item 12 in public, which would only leave the private minute to be considered in the private session? Okay. Minute from the previous meeting held on the 28th of June for approval. We have a draft minute. Are people content, subject to any amendments, that the minute is a correct record? And decisions since our last full authority meeting. We've had one decision taken by correspondence since our last meeting, and this was to make an approval for an offer to be made to the trade unions in relation to the staff pay claim. So I'm moving on now to agenda item 3, which is my chair's report. I'll take the report as read. It's been quite a fulsome couple of months. I've had the privilege of part of my induction of meeting a variety of our key stakeholders. And in particular, I'd like to talk about the meeting that the Chief Constable and I had with the presidential meeting with two of our COSLA councillors, where we talked about that strategic relationship, the importance of it. And again, I've had the privilege of having a meeting with, or joining a routine meeting with the national scrutiny conveners with COSLA. Deb Connors was there alongside other members of Police Scotland and SPA, where there's such rich discussion on what are the key matters of concern for the scrutiny conveners locally, how much they value the support of Police Scotland, and how SPA's oversight can help sustain this. So these were the areas that I thought were particularly of note from my report. I'll take the rest as read, but happy to take any questions. Angela, do you have something?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. It's very comprehensive. Could I just ask for a further a bit of detail on Operation Ford that is mentioned in your report? I think that we're all aware of the reports that we've seen on unacceptable behaviour towards politicians, both local and national, and I'm conscious that there are elections coming up next year, and I wondered what that Operation Ford would cover. We certainly don't want to see people deterred from standing from public office because of the behaviour of others.
No, absolutely. So again, COSLA had hosted a roundtable discussion which included a wide range of representatives across local government, Scottish Government, policing, the media, ourselves, and the purpose was to discuss that very issue of rising levels of abuse and intimidation experienced by elected officials, particularly via social media, but not exclusively, and through the distribution of misinformation. Significant challenge for elected officials, and we heard that at that day of people perhaps living and working in quite remote and rural areas. So it's not only within the big urban areas, and it is that significant challenge for those who are putting themselves forward for public life or exposed in the media. And I wonder if Deb Connors would like to add anything or summarise, I think, the very supportive work that Police Scotland are doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the question. I think it is important to echo that it is unacceptable that any person who's an elected official is subject to any kind of abuse. Operation Ford is particularly focused with local councillors. There are other operations that work around members of Parliament. However, it's to facilitate local councillors and elected officials being able to raise concerns to dedicated officers. This will enhance their safety and security of the individuals, raise awareness of their own personal safety, not just physically but also online. We will offer proportionate advice and action, and if there are any risks or threats identified, then we are then able to deal with it. It's also an intelligence collection. We know that a number of elected officials accept a certain amount of abuse as part of their job, and we keep reiterating that message. It's not acceptable. So it's also an intelligence collection purposes. I think the main bit for us is we work very closely with COSLA on this. We've facilitated 12 Opt-Forward briefings. I think there's just over 1,200 councillors, and we've delivered it to 400. We're also doing regular engagement with COSLA to look at identified joint areas where we can work together to ensure the safety of elected officials. It highlights the importance of local authorities, COSLA, but also the importance of local community officers and our local command teams to make sure that they link in with their local councillors, not just the wider Opt-Forward. But it is designed to ensure that we look after our elected officials, and if there are any issues, they have a direct point of contact where they can raise it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deb Connors. Yeah, happy with that?
Yeah, thank you. And just to say, I mean, I welcome that, and I think that there are some significant challenges that our elected members and politicians have to make in these roles, given the demands on the services. So anything that we can do to support them, I think, is to be welcomed.
Thank you very much. Pauline Howie?
Very much for your report, Chair, and for the tremendous engagement work that you're undertaking. I wanted to ask a couple of areas where you mention opportunities for further efficiencies and partnership working in line with the principles of public sector reform. You mention in section 3 the engagement with cops and opportunities for efficiencies in the wider criminal justice system, and then in section 4 your discussions with COSLA around collaboration and co-location around estates. Could you elaborate in those areas, please?
So I'll maybe take the estates question first, and I think the public sector estate is a key matter, I think, strategically for all of us in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of the public purse, but it's also about efficiency and effectiveness of co-location and the benefits that brings, and clearly we're all keen to see that move forwards in a positive way that's both cost efficient but also provides better services for local communities. My meeting with the Crown Agent John Logue, it was strategic in nature, where we talked about efficiencies of what was happening within the criminal justice system. I didn't go into it in granular detail with him, but I think we were both keen to see that continued response, particularly with the improved outcomes, improving service to victims who were seeing cases going through more rapidly, but also services to both Police Scotland and the Crown in terms of a more efficient way of delivering the service. And again, I'd invite Deb Connors to come in and say a bit more.
I'll invite DCC Smith, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think a couple of points I'd like to make, if possible. We are key stakeholders in the wider CJ Efficiencies, and obviously work really closely with several partners, including Crown Office, Lord Advocate's Office, SETS, etc. And I think through the work of initiatives such as summary case management, for example, 34% reduction in citations, which is it's getting there. It's absolutely not where we want it to be, but we've seen real positive results of the work that's been going on at the moment. And to the Chair's point, for us, this is about making the victim's journey better and quicker and more efficient, as well as for our workforce too, for police officers not being cited as much to go to court on their rest days and annual leave, which we've had real success with. The court scheduling app is up and running, which has been a real success too, to enable us to be able to make those decisions around when trials should be scheduled. And SCM has shown a real reduction in adjournments, so when people are being called to court, they're giving their evidence, which is great. Internally, we're working a lot with partners on remote witness evidence provision so that people can give their evidence remotely as opposed to having to go to court. So there's real strides being made. I suppose for me, I probably would stress that we are really keen to work at pace in this area too with partners. So we are around the table talking about digital transformation in that as well from my portfolio, and really keen to kind of continue that journey moving forward. And co-location, absolutely support that. We've got offices in Livingston and Inverness who are working closely with CJ Partners, but would like to expand that further as part of the estate's master plan work. So thank you.
Much both for those updates. In respect of the last point around co-location, I think there are some particularly regulatory issues that need to be dealt with across the whole system to enable common sense to prevail in terms of kind of a shared estate across public services.
Thank you very much indeed. Alistair?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Appreciate the report, and I had a question around your meeting with Scottish Biometrics Commissioner, where you discussed live facial recognition technology. That's something that it's a technology that seems to be reported upon often in the newspaper. Perhaps an increasing number of forces across the UK intended to use it, and also those that are currently using it expanding the use of it. And I noted that earlier this week there was a comment in the Guardian and other newspapers where the Equality and Human Rights Commission have actually said that it might be breaching the European Convention on Human Rights, and they were commenting around this weekend's Notting Hill Carnival. Now, given the support that Dr Plastow, the Commissioner, has for its use, provided it's lawful, effective, and the practices are ethical, I just wondered, following on from the conversation that we were part of, where we are with that, what Dr Plastow's thoughts are, and perhaps what Police Scotland's thoughts are, and perhaps adopting it going forward.
Thanks, Alistair, and I'll bring Deb Connors in a moment, but Dr Plastow was very clear about the benefits to society in terms of that he supports the lawful and ethical use of live facial recognition for criminal justice and police purposes. And we did discuss that outcome of the national conversation that was following the rights-based pathway that Police Scotland and the authority have been taking forwards, which obviously, as you know, was reported to the Policing and Performance Committee. Can I ask Deb Connors to talk us through a bit more, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll outline some headlines and then pass to DCC Smith, who's got the wider digital and AI portfolio. As the echo what the Chief Constable said in June, that we're passionate about meeting the positive duty that is on us to use new technology for law enforcement. But we need to keep people safe from harm, we need to protect the vulnerable, and we do need to bring criminals for justice. We totally understand that people need assurances and reassurances about how we would use live facial recognition, and that links to the point with the recent cases that have been in the papers about the oversight that's required, in what circumstances it would be used and what the checks and balances are that would be on that. We have taken a big step forward in the conversations that have been had, and I think the engagement from all different areas of the community, stakeholders and different bodies has been really, really positive. But we do have a lot more steps to take. We need to engage more with stakeholders and the public. We also need to look at business cases, policy, operating procedures and financial elements. There is still a lot to do. But we will move ahead with the detailed work around live facial recognition, coming back to the rights-based pathway and making sure that we take time to understand the governance, the proportionality and the high levels of scrutiny that will be required, and that constant engagement. And if okay, I'll hand over to DCC Smith. Thank you.
Just to follow on from that, really, I think important to note that the results from the National Conversation Survey show that in relation to the three specific use cases we put forward, most respondents were very or somewhat comfortable with Police Scotland using live facial recognition, which is really positive for us. We are currently working through the conference with stakeholders, and further work continues to understand how would we assure a robust evaluation of this particular technology, and I think that's really, really important. What data would be required to provide our evaluation and assurance? What further engagement should be undertaken, and we're working that through at the moment. We know that's exceptionally important. And also, what would our reporting duty look like should we implement LFR? So would that be an annual report like public sector equality duty or some other format that would take? We were also working to understand what assurance we would need around bias mitigation, which is something which is really important, and the role for primary legislation and independent oversight, which is something that we know is exceptionally important. I suppose just to follow on from that, we are extremely supportive, and within my team in transformation, we're working through what that would look like in terms of timelines and particular technology, alongside the operational leads in terms of what the requirements would be and what steps we would take to understand what technology we would look at. Also, I suppose really important to note that this is just one element of, for me, what's a really exciting digital and data opportunity that we've got moving forward, and absolutely fully supportive of this, but viewed within the round of exciting digital and data opportunities over the next 2 to 3 years.
No, thank you very much for that. I think it is important. I think the initial approach by Police Scotland, along with the SB and the Biometrics Commissioner, was the right one to initiate that conversation. And I'm, very reassured to hear that you've listened. There are still questions that people require a response to, and you're dealing with this in a systematic way, but in an empathetic way. And the outcome ultimately is to, as the Biometric Commissioner says, lawful, effective and ethical policies, and there's a proportionality in there. So I'm reassured to hear all these things. Thank you.
And Tom Halpin.
Thank you, Chair. In your report, you referred to your meeting with Professor Dyer from the Centre of Youth and Criminal Justice, and that's a long-standing relation between Police Scotland and the Authority, particularly around places of safety for children and young people, and the inappropriateness of police custody as a place to hold a child. There was considerable adaptations and practices put in place, particularly London Road Police Office in Glasgow, to ensure it's a trauma-informed interaction with young people. I'm aware that not all young people in Glasgow are being taken to that facility. What is the planning for developing that practice and making the adaptations to make it as best as it can be, albeit we recognise it's not the most appropriate place, but in the lack of other alternatives, there's an inevitability that children and young people will come into the care of Police Scotland. But if they're not going to that facility, where are they going and what's the plans?
That's helpful. So as you would expect, the discussion that we had did talk about the inappropriateness of police custody for children and young people, and the variety of needs that they have in there. I think the step forwards that the updating or the change of London Road had started, and I think that certainly Fiona had seen that as a starter for 10 rather than completing the finished journey. But as you'll know, alternative provisions are quite a challenge to settle on in terms of what's going forwards. But perhaps I could ask DCC Connors to give some comments on the progress we're having in minimising the number of children we have in custody.
Thank you. It's a very important question, and thank you very much. We do understand the significant impact that it will have on a child that is brought into custody. We also understand, we are the police, and it is part and parcel of our role where there is necessity to bring children into custody. We do have clear processes in place to ensure that the care of children when they're in police custody, as you've said, staff understanding the trauma that can come with that, the processes we need to think of. Children think different from adults and they respond to things differently from adults. That is very much part of our sessions with our training with staff in custody. It's very much also part of the estate's master plan. How do we improve our custody estate in particular? HMIC have highlighted a few cases where children have been kept in custody for an unacceptably long time. We do continue to face challenges in particular, and it's around the provision of an alternative, safe and secure estate, and that's where we work closely with our local authority provisions. That would be one of the main things that would enable us to prevent children having to stay in custody. We have made great strides, though. At the moment, we have a 14% reduction in children that are arrested being brought into custody, so diversions, other pathways in terms of route to prosecution, working with Crown Prosecution Service, local authorities and other providers. So that's very important. And also we've reduced by 17% those children that are actually held overnight within our custodies. So there is a lot of work going on, but the main issues are around alternative provision. We're part of a collaborative multi-agency pathway, and they're looking at two things. One is the alternative care provision, which, as I say, we do need to improve collectively. And the other one is to create the alternative pathways to bring in children into custody in the first place. So all of that is ongoing. Thank you.
Any follow-ups from that, Tom?
I commend that and really the commitment to ensuring the best conditions possible in those circumstances are genuinely adhered to. What is the issue that can't be focused on the facility that was created at London Road Police Office, that children are not going there by default? Is there an issue with that facility that we're learning from?
I think we're always learning, and the London Road facility is an important one that we're looking at. I think we need to be able to look at our custody estate in the round and be able to take that, as I've said, alternative pathways, safe and secure accommodation, rather than building in perhaps bespoke for children that come through custody. If you look at the wider estates master plan, we need to ensure that we've got the right facilities. But the direction of travel is to have a better process nationally and across the board about children coming into custody in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, and echoing Tom's recognition of the progress that's been made, and hopefully now that momentum's been built, we can move forwards and look forward to seeing that in the overall estates master plan. If there are no other questions from members about my report, I'll move on to our committee chairs' reports, starting where the chair can give a brief highlight of the committee meetings and any questions that we might have from board members. And I'm going to start off with the Commonwealth Games Oversight Group and Alistair Rahay.
Thank you, Chair. The Oversight Group was held on the 29th of July 2025. I'll take the report as being read, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that may have arisen from it. As you can see, that the main items of business were an operational briefing, planning assumptions, the one-year out launch plan, wellbeing arrangements, finance update and risk update. Just a slight update on finance since the meeting, and that is that the minute of agreement for planning costs has now been formally signed off. So that's significant progress. And in terms of risk, you'll see within the report that there is one risk that was currently outside tolerance, and that was around vetting and accreditation. But again, there is significant progress being made there. Within the last month or so, it's reduced from very high to high, 20 to 15 in terms of the scoring, and it's heading down towards the 10. And Police Scotland are confident that will be the case. And just a very quick final comment from me 1 year out, I think Police Scotland are making really significant progress in terms of their role in delivering safe and successful games. 1 year will be upon us before we know it, so we commend the work that's been undertaken. And as I came into Queen Street Station today, I saw an advert, a poster advertising the games and some of the sports that will take place. So it's becoming very real very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's good to hear that progress. Moving on to Forensic Services Committee and Polly Day.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair. I'm just going to really focus on one issue because we have the Director's report coming up later and I don't want to steal our thunder. It was the principal one that we had most discussion about was the drug driving pilot from Shetland, which highlighted the albeit on a very small scale, the extent of the issue with drug driving. And there was proposals to scale this up with, I think it's 3 pilots in the future. And we largely discussed the rollout of those, some of the unintended consequences perhaps. We were talked about the importance of samples going through SPA, because in the report it didn't look like that was going to happen, but it is. And also aspects relating to the governance of that. And we were assured by the Crown Office that they would be able to cope with any increase in demand, which was very important for us. We also touched on the issue of the importance of these going through Resources Committee following any Police Scotland internal governance. And beyond that, I think everything else is in the Director's report.
Thank you very much. People content with that? So Chris Cregan with the Legal Committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read. I'll just make 3 remarks in relation to it. Firstly, you will note that, as usual, the committee considered quarterly statistical information in relation to legal services claims handling. The committee has welcomed improvements and adjustments in the presentation of statistical information from Police Scotland on claims handling, which has aided the efficacy and is aiding the efficacy of our scrutiny in that area. Secondly, I would draw attention to the strong focus of the committee on organisational learning and the management of risk in relation to employment tribunal cases, and in particular in connection with requests for reasonable adjustments in the workplace and the handling of them. And that theme of organisational learning continued in our scrutiny of a comprehensive update of live public and fatal accident inquiries, and we took assurance that lessons are being captured and cascaded appropriately in conjunction with the organisational learning framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Any comments or questions? No, thank you. And it's good to see the organisational learning coming to the committee and being able to monitor progress there. So I'm over to Pauline Howie with Resources Committee.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the report as read, but would want to highlight 3 particular issues, excluding the Q1 Financial Monitoring Report, which is item 8 on today's agenda. The committee were pleased to receive the CAUSE Phase 2 End of Project report. This is a multi-million pound digital programme to replace 44 disparate systems with one national single source of data. We heard not just about the efficiencies that have been achieved, but also the tremendous benefits that are being felt on the front line of policing. So we were very pleased to receive that. We were also pleased to approve the full business case for enhanced communities policing. As we know, this is central to delivering the 2030 vision. And we noted the interdependencies around workforce developments, digital developments, and the Estates Master Plan. We discussed at length the challenges around the transformation capacity to deliver the ambitions set out in the 2030 vision and 3-year delivery plan, and the committee asked for an update on how the challenges around capacity and prioritisation would be addressed for its next meeting in November.
Thank you very much. People content with that? Then finally over for Mary Pitt-Caithley with ARAC, please.
Chair. Yes, the note of the meeting is there for members happy to answer any questions on it, but I'd highlight just a couple of things. We had 2 very useful internal audit reports, one on health and safety, where we had some concerns over the number of recommendations that were being made for the service to consider. The service reassured us they're very happy to take on board those recommendations and to implement them as quickly as possible. The Force Executive also reiterated the value that they place on the work that's done on health and safety across the service and the fact that it is a priority for them. The second internal audit report was on the management of recommendations that come to us from and come to Police Scotland from a variety of inspectorates and agencies, audit agencies. And so, again, the committee has fairly regularly commented on the number of recommendations which are out of date, where there should have been work completed by now, and where in some cases some of these recommendations highlight areas of risk. And again, we were reassured that the committee, the executive is very committed to giving a higher priority to closing off all of these recommendations as soon as possible. So we'll be keeping an eye on that in ARAC. Secondly, highlight the report that we got on whistleblowing. We had an annual report from Police Scotland, and the committee was very keen to understand the process that takes place within the service to distinguish between the significant number of concerns that are raised under a whistleblowing heading and the much smaller number which are considered after close examination to be protected disclosures and to understand the process that's undertaken. So we're going to do some further work with that, on that with the service, and a further report will come forward to the committee. And finally, just to highlight that the draft annual report and accounts were submitted to the committee and were considered by us. The process now is ongoing to finalise those accounts and the annual report, and that will come back to us in September, and then hopefully we'll be able to make a recommendation to the authority for those to be accepted and approved.
Thank you very much. So we look forward to that in September. Members content with that update? Therefore, I'll move on and hand over to Deb Connor to take us through the Chief Constable's report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm delivering this report on behalf of the Chief Constable, and I'll briefly pick out some highlights from what has been a very busy summer for policing in Scotland. And I'll talk about Operation Roll. During the summer, officers, staff and volunteers, supported by colleagues from across UK policing, Blue Light and Health Services, local authorities, military, Scottish and UK governments and third sector colleagues, have ensured the security and safety across a range of events, most notably the visit to Scotland of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Vice President, J.D. Vance. What's vital to note is that while we responded to these events, day-to-day policing continued for our communities, including investigations and arrests following murders, the ongoing disruption of serious and organised crime, including arrests under Op Portledge, action as part of human trafficking investigations, proactivity around retail crime, and non-recent investigations. Enabling major events and delivering on the day-to-day needs of communities underlines policing's essential role in building the safety and security and social cohesion which are prerequisites for Scotland and its people to thrive and flourish. We are hugely grateful to our important partners for their collaboration and support in that shared mission. I want to record my thanks for the efforts of officers, staff and volunteers, including cancelling plans at short notice to take on additional, extended or amended duties this summer. Policing in Scotland could not deliver for our communities without the hard work, professionalism and goodwill of our workforce, and I do not underestimate the sacrifices our people make to do their duty. I'd like to talk about staff pay. Ensuring our workforce is paid fairly while maintaining a sustainable service while public finances remain under intense pressure is an ongoing challenge and a priority. This week we reached an agreement on pay which will see police officers receive a 4% pay increase from April 2025 to March 2026, followed by a further 3.5% increase from April 2026 to March 2027. The same uplift applies to a range of allowances for officers. We know how important pay is for our people, and the additional certainty of a multi-year agreement is a very positive element of this deal. I would like to thank everyone involved in the discussions, the team who worked on the official side, and also our staff associations, including the Scottish Police Federation, for their constructive and professional engagement, which has meant that we've reached this point. Processes are ongoing with the trade unions on an aligned staff agreement, and we will be able to update on progress. I'd like to talk about the workforce survey. As I've discussed, pay is a key issue for our workforce, and at the same time it is crucial we listen carefully to our people and act on what they tell us to improve their experiences and better support the front line to deliver for our communities. We have previously reported on the feedback we received from over 11,000 officers and staff who completed our workforce survey, and action the service has taken to respond to some of the more challenging feedback, including a robust programme of internal face-to-face engagement supported by additional digital communication. We have now commenced this year's survey, and over the coming weeks we will encourage officers and staff to complete the survey to provide an understanding of how change is being felt and what further action can be taken to support our people. We will provide further updates to the authority on the findings of the survey and action to address what's most important to our workforce. Thank you, Chair.
Deb Connors, thank you very much indeed for that. I now have had notification of a number of members who wish to ask questions. I'll start with Chris first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Connors, for the report. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the section of the report on the interim guidance on the use of workplace facilities. Obviously, I've asked questions in this area before. It's an ongoing area of progress. I note what's said in the report about the small number of colleagues who will be directly impacted by the new arrangements that are being put in place. And I think in particular we're talking about trans and transitioning officers and staff. And I note what's said about the review of the estate to ensure suitable and sufficient facilities are available in all workplaces, and the work that's being done to encourage those affected to seek support. And I welcome all of that. I wondered if you could comment on what level of confidence you have in relation to progress in this area and the identification of suitable and available facilities. I think particularly recognising that this is, although a small population of staff, officers and staff, it's not a static population in the sense that people will be making decisions on an ongoing basis, people will be deployed in different places on an ongoing basis. And so recognising that, what level of confidence do you have about the progress that you're making, and that you are in a position to deal with issues as they arise? And I recognise this is also, of course, a question for the Scottish Police Authority. Thank you.
I'll hand over to DCC Spears, who leads on that area. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your question. We spoke at the last board about the audit work that we're doing around the estate, and that work was completed since our last board meeting, and the introduction of some interim guidance was as a consequence of having completed our audit. What we were trying to achieve there was to look at the number, the adequacy and the sufficiency of facilities across the estate. So that is done. The guidance, I think, is really clear, looking at facilities both in terms of single sex, mixed sex and sole occupancy. But I think what you will see from the guidance that we've published, at the heart of that is a desire to consider the dignity and respect of all our staff. I think a really important part of work that continues in this space is very much around engagement with our diversity staff associations. I would suggest that our relationship currently is excellent with our diversity staff associations, and I'm confident we're taking measured steps in a very dignified way to ensure that the facilities and the adequacy of facilities are being met right across the force. So I would suggest, Chris, that the confidence at this point in time is high, notwithstanding this is a complex area.
Thank you very much for the response, and I appreciate the response, and it's good to hear that you have that level of confidence. I guess I would underline the point that I made about the fact that, of course, it's not a static population or a static situation, so it will continue to be an area that it will be important to focus on. You mentioned the relationship with the diversity staff associations, which is obviously critical in this area. I wonder if you could also say something briefly about wider progress in relation to the review and the ongoing consultation and engagement which is taking place to support the review.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've always said that we would take a very measured approach, and our aim would be to take the right step at the right time, and I think we continue to do that. We've been looking at, well, you know, we've looked at stop and search, and we published measure guidance in advance of our last board. We're looking at data and data recording, and that work nears a conclusion. So I would suggest that much of what we're doing is advanced. I think there are still some guidance and some statements that we'd like to see from the Human Rights Commission, and we're mindful of that. But much of the work, is, I would suggest, is in an advanced state. We talk about interim guidance, and that's predicated on looking at some of the rulings and looking at some of the guidance, if you like, from Human Rights Commission. That is still awaited. We will bring a report in the coming week also into the People Committee, and that again will present an opportunity for further dialogue. But I think we've taken a year now through a review group, and I think we've tended to try and get that step right, and I think we're in a fairly advanced place with the work that we're doing.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'll hand over to Pauline now.
Very much. I was pleased to read about the success in Edinburgh of the work of the task force to reduce retail crime. I wonder if you could explain how the learning from Edinburgh has been applied wider across the country.
Thank you. Yeah, so really important work under the banner of the Retail Crime Task Force, which we now have dedicated officers in, and it comes in different areas. We work particularly with the industry in terms of our retailers very closely, not just in city centres, but also in our rural areas as well. I think one of the key things in relation to Edinburgh is our ability to filter in the crimes that are happening, the information that comes in, and how we use that intelligence. Because a lot of our shoplifting and our retail crime is actually being carried out by a relatively small number of people. And they may well be either stealing to order, or they have the networks that then they're able to dispose of those goods. So if we look at it as an ecosystem rather than an individual aspect, we work with our retailers to ensure that firstly, as much prevention as possible is being done with our retailers, understanding the pressures that they're under with their margins and the difficulties that come with that. But things like CCTV, where goods are placed, that's a really important part. Then being able to make sure that the crimes are reported to us quickly and effectively so that we can get in to understand who's committing them and then pass into the criminal justice system. And that intelligence aspect of where are the goods going, where are they being passed on to is also an essential part, because it is an end-to-end. So the learning from Edinburgh is around making sure we've got the right teams, linking in with the local community teams, but having a focus on retail crime, linking in with the retailers so we can take action on being able to identify those that are committing the retail crime and then bringing them to justice. The wider elements of partnership, you know, a lot of shoplifting is fueled by homelessness. There are addiction issues, there are alcohol issues. So that partner element, which is also part of the retail crime strategy, is really, really important as well. So that's the main learning from Edinburgh, is the ability to look at all of those elements and bring them together. And because we've now got the Retail Crime Task Force with dedicated officers, we're able to share that learning across the country and then really capitalise. We are seeing reports of retail crime going up, and that is in part due to the confidence that retailers now have to report to us, and then we will work together to ensure that we tackle the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Dep Connors. I know you're presenting on behalf of the Chief Constable, but as always, it gives us an insight into the breadth and the depth, the variety and the complexity of the work undertaken by Police Scotland. I wanted to pick up on the section on violence against officers, and within there you highlight two very recent and frankly shocking attacks on officers. We recently have introduced body-worn video, continuing to roll that across Police Scotland, and one of the hopes for that, one of the expectations, is this will assist in reducing violence against officers. I know it's early days and there will be a full evaluation, but I wonder if you've got any comments around that, and then wider, what actions Police Scotland are taking to reduce violence against officers, you know, moving into that preventative space.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll come on to DCC Spears in a second, who looks at the kind of officer safety portfolio. I think what's important to highlight at the beginning that any attacks on officers is completely unacceptable, as we know with emergency workers more broadly. Officers are out day in, day out, and our staff who work in custody. It's not just officers who are on the front line. It is really important. They are there to assist the public. They are there to help the public. We know that they are often deployed into difficult situations and conflict situations, but it's completely unacceptable for officers to face any violence as staff as well. I think body-worn video was a really important step forward. It was one of the Chief Constable's priorities, and we have delivered it, and it is now rolling out, particularly across the north, and it will move into some of the bigger areas such as Edinburgh and Glasgow, where we see some of our big issues. We actually see more assaults to an extent in some of the northern, more rural areas, because there isn't the support from other officers. So it's important that the body-worn video is put into the right places. We're already hearing instances of where, when the cameras are turned on, people's behaviour starts to de-escalate because they know they're on camera. So that is something that at the moment we can't quantify some of that trajectory, but we know anecdotally and some of the evidence we've seen that as soon as the camera goes on, people are aware that their behaviour is then captured. So that starts to de-escalate behaviour. So that is really important. It also gives officers confidence that what they're dealing with, their de-escalation, their interactions with members of the public is being captured. So officers being able to interact carefully with people, they've always been able to do that, they've always been professional, but there's an extra confidence now that that is being recorded on there. So we haven't seen perhaps some of the statistics yet with body-worn video, but we're very clear on the anecdotal evidence that it is starting to have an impact. I'll come to DCC Spears more widely.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe to add to that, two key areas. One is Your Safety Matters, which I've spoken about here at the board before. So that is the forum where we are very specifically looking at the circumstances around officer assaults and injuries, and particularly looking at lessons learned and steps that we can take to try and improve the safety and well-being of our officers. That connects to officer safety training. We have an enhanced programme which we continually review. Over the last couple of years, we have increased the time taken on officer safety training. It's a non-negotiable course that officers will undertake every 12 months. What we do know on a positive note is that within the first 3 months of those officers having undertaken that training, there's about a 40% reduction in the likelihood of those officers being assaulted. So I never underpin the importance of that training, and particularly looking at a lot of elements around verbal communication that allows us to try and improve that. So it's a matter, Alistair, that's under review on a monthly basis. I would always say that any assault on an officer is an assault too many, and so we scrutinise this space, and we will continue to do that as we go forward.
Thank you for those responses, and I would agree 100% that it is, any assault on officers or staff is totally unacceptable, and I'm encouraged to hear about the work, and appreciate it's very early days for body-worn video, and you will do a full evaluation, but to hear that early anecdotal evidence that is helping to de-escalate situations is positive to hear at this moment in time. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I now have a question from Tom.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about the demands on policing just now, particularly with every week protests having to police. We're moving into the football season, events, we've had major events over the summer, etc. It's just reassurance around those resource deployments to business as usual in communities, that communities can be assured that the police are there for them at times in terms of public confidence in the service across all communities.
Thank you very much for the question. It's an important question because it does raise the issues of our ability to be able to manage business as usual as well as manage the events. And I described during op roll our ability to keep a focus on business as usual, and we will continue to do that. But I think it has to be said, we're seeing an increase in the volume of protest, we're seeing an increase in the volume of challenging protests and counter-protest. So whilst we're able to manage business as usual, we will continue to do so. It undoubtedly does place pressure on our staff. And I think with the busy summer that we've had, officers not being able to get some of the time off, and I'll ask DCC Spears perhaps to comment on some of our overtime and our time in lieu costs, which shows us that pressure is coming through. I think in relation to football in particular, we've got a number of clubs now in Europe, which hasn't been seen for many years. And, we celebrate the fact that there is a positive culture for football in Scotland, and the clubs are doing well. And we know that the majority of fans, they love going to football, they enjoy it, and it's a very tiny minority that cause issues. But the volume of games that will then increase into the scheduling of the system, on top of the domestic challenges, plus the actual cup games, you put pressure into the scheduling. And the better the clubs do as they go through Europe, it means we have travelling fans, it means we have more pressure in the system. And we then have to resource those games. One of the big changes we've seen in relation to football is the fact that a number of what we would class as smaller clubs, I know they may be offended by that, but the smaller clubs who normally wouldn't have risk groups actually now do have risk groups. So games that would be police-free, we are now having to police. So we are seeing an increase in games. We're seeing an increase in European football, but we're also seeing an increase in the number of games that we have to police. We know that violence and pyrotechnics has been a growing issue with disorder over the past few years, and we know that in December and January we saw disorder in Glasgow and the high streets, which was very concerning for the public. We're doing everything that we can to try and mitigate that. We have the forced mobilisation model where officers who would not normally work 7 days are now being put onto a shift pattern where they can support events at weekends and during the week. We've got high demand days, the days that we know are going to be high demand. Again, we're using officers who would generally be in back of house functions or not doing shift work and now being asked to work those, and we're scheduling that in. We do constantly review our policing plans, particularly with intelligence, and this relates to not just football but protest and any other event. How can we be proportionate in our use of resources and use intelligence and other mechanisms? This leads also into partnership working with event organisers or football clubs in particular. There's a number of roles that actually police step into which would be better served by either stewards or others. So there is ongoing work about the roles and responsibilities of police. The multi-agency group in particular is really important because that involves Scottish Government, the clubs, the authorities, COPFS, where we look at things like football banning orders. There has to be consequences for disorder or violent behaviour from the small minority of the fans in the club. And I think the last thing I would probably say is the number of resources that are not the visible resources on football or protests, but our intelligence analysts, our investigation teams who have to pick up the subsequent investigations if there is any disorder. All of the events, and football in particular has a very large proportion of the iceberg that is not seen. You see the visible resources, but there is a huge amount of work that sits underneath. So reassurance for business as usual, yes, absolutely. We ensure that we look after our communities. That's why the Policing for Our Communities model is so important, because we want to be able to put those into the communities and not abstract them. But I will be clear that it does put pressure on our resources and our staff who we know are very tired after a long summer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just the one point that I would probably highlight, just in terms of the strain that events has on the service, and we have seen a change over the last couple of months. So officers, by way of compensation at times, will receive overtime. In other instances, they will claim toil, and we have a policy in place that they will get to take their toil within a 3-month period, or alternatively we would buy back the toil. Regrettably, the spend for us in the month of July alone was £500,000 because officers weren't able to get the time back, which to me demonstrates that there's a real demand on the service, and it is largely through events.
If you may, thanks for the answers, and those pressures are recognised and fully understood. My follow-up, as you've touched on it, is the budget implications from this. And has there been contingency? Are you able to forecast in terms of the impact in the budget going forward so that we can adjust or advocate accordingly?
Yeah, as you know, Tom, we have a number of governance arrangements that are in place around budget, and a big proportion of our spend is around overtime, and we acutely and carefully look at that. We have built contingency into our budget, so we have arrangements in place where, you know, we have a contingency fund that will help us support some of the demands around serious and organised crime as we go into the winter storms. But the trend around toil is quite significant, so we'll continue to look at that on a monthly basis. But it's a growing challenge for us, is just to manage that element of the budget. I mean, I think what's really important is we don't want officers that work when they should be off. So it's regrettable that we're in that position of having to compensate them through payment for things like toil.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure you'll have a more detailed report at the People Committee where you can go over that with a fine-tooth comb. And I think I'd just like to echo our thanks to the staff who go on above beyond, both staff and officers, in terms of what they do. Mary would like to add another question.
Thank you. Just on a follow-up to Tom's question, with specific reference to the protest which took place in Falkirk last Saturday, which I think we probably all saw in the media as well. This was generally a very vocal protest and counter-protest, but not particularly violent, with relatively small number of arrests. However, it required you to mount a proportionate and effective policing operation, upholding the right to protest peacefully while enabling the general public to go about their business. And this required a significant police response involving a very large number of officers pretty much all day on Saturday. Given the potential for further protests, both locally and nationally, as we read in the media, could you say something more about the impact on the local community and about how you liaise with the local community about what they might find when they wake up on a Saturday and find themselves literally in the middle of something like this? And do you want to say anything more about the business as usual policing and the impact on that across the whole of Forth Valley? Thank you.
Thank you very much again for the question, and I'd like to pay tribute to the officers who overall were able to really keep the protest and the counter-protest really calm, and as you say, very minimal impact in terms of arrest. And I think that was down to the style and tone that the officers set. That links into the style and tone. You know, people have a right to peaceful protest, and we absolutely support that. Police Scotland have got a really long history of supporting that right to peaceful protest and assembly. There's a number of protests that go on a regular basis. So over the summer, we've seen a number of protests in that particular location. I think the different dynamic in this instance was the fact that people moved from other protests where they may have been at different hotels to come down to that particular one in Falkirk. So the mobility of protesters to be able to move around rather than having kind of a different seats of protest was a big part of that. It will absolutely impact on officers and staff, and I've talked about that in relation to football, but events more generally. The nature of protest, as we all know, it is unpredictable. It can be really challenging. So being able to get the balance of the right number of resources is really important. In this instance, because we were working with the Vice President's visit and we had a focus on business as usual, we were able to move resources between the different operations and maximise that. Going forwards, we monitor tension really carefully with our local community officers, and there was a significant amount of work done around misinformation. There was some misinformation about different hotels that would be housing individuals that are seeking asylum, and actually that wasn't correct. Coming back to the first question that I got about local councillors, that was so important that we had the local councillor links, we had the local authority, we had our community officers to be able to talk to communities, dispel the misinformation and provide reassurance. But we're constantly putting pressure on what is a limited resource in business as usual. I think going forwards, because we now don't have the Vice President's visit, we don't have the resources in place for other events, we now have to resource forwards and either take people off response or take people out of our community teams to be able to provide the resources for protest. We will always maintain business as usual, we will always maintain focuses on our communities, but it's likely to be that we're not able to respond to calls as quickly as we would like, or some of the investigations that officers are carrying will not be as quick as we would like, or updates to victims will not be as quick as we would like, because there will be unavoidable pressure on there. So I think what I would say is we monitor very carefully the intelligence around protest. We resource what we see. We are definitely seeing an increase in protest activity, the challenging nature and complexity and the tensions that come with some of that protest. But we're working hard with local authorities, our community teams, to put down that tension. But we will respond, but it absolutely will put pressure on business as usual. And as I've said, particularly over a busy summer, we've got Operation Moonbeam. There's a number of pressures that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Paul now.
Thank you, Chair. An important component of policing by consent is that the public understands why a law is in place. So noting that and noting the component the part in your report about prescription of Palestine action, can the DCC explain as fully as possible why Palestine action has been prescribed and what I'm looking for is an assurance that their prescription is proportionate, because at the moment, the extent of the public justification for this seems to be that they've done some serious criminal damage, and there may be stuff in court cases in England that we're not allowed to know. So if you can tell us as fully as you can, noting that this is Scotland and the judicial system is different and restrictions are different, is there anything more you can tell us about why they're being prescribed?
Prescription of an organisation rests with the government and the UK government. It is their decision, and I don't feel that there is anything that I can comment on, and it would be inappropriate for me to do so.
Well, you can't explain why people are in Scotland being arrested then. I mean, there must be some justification for the prescription, and that must have been communicated to you.
As I say, the prescription was covered by the UK government, and they prescribed it. We act on the law. I can talk about our approach to protest, and perhaps if I explain a little bit more around that. We have our code of ethics. You know, we're committed to human rights, as you know, and the core values of that. We do recognise the democratic right to peaceful protest, and any interference with that right must be in accordance with law, which is what we act upon. It also needs to be necessary and proportionate. The prescription of Palestine action, as you say, it came into force on the 5th of July, and there's a range of criminal offences that relate to the membership and support of a prescribed organisation under the Terrorism Act. That can include things like wearing clothing, carrying or displaying articles in public, in circumstances that would arouse reasonable suspicion that an individual is a member or supporter of Palestine, of a prescribed organisation, which is the legislation. We issued guidance to all officers once the prescription had come in conjunction with COPFS. And I think this is the part I'd like to reiterate and perhaps reassure you, which is the guidance reminds officers of the duty to uphold the rights to freedom of belief, expression and peaceful assembly. And the need for any police action must be legal, necessary and proportionate. The guidance outlines the criminal offences in relation to membership, support of Palestine, or prescribed organisation under the Terrorism Act, but it also makes it clear it remains lawful to express support for Palestine, the Palestinian cause, or to display the Palestinian flag. So it also reminds officers the positive duty that they have around peaceful protest. As I say, Police Scotland has a long history of upholding human rights and being able to make the difficult balances, but we will always act in accordance with the law.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair, just for the record, I'm disappointed that I'm not getting any more on this. That I have asked for a justification for this. You're implementing the law. I'm just looking for a further explanation of why this organisation is being prescribed. And I have to say I'm not satisfied with the answer. We're an oversight body. I'm trying to provide some oversight on behalf of the general public, and I'm getting stonewalled here. I don't think that's acceptable.
Paul, I think at the moment, I think the DCC has given the information she can in terms of the legislation, and if that's not satisfying you, I think we've had the answer. I think we then need to continue this, and we'll come back to it in the minute. For the minute, we'll come back to it for in our next meeting. But I think at the moment we've taken this as far as we can. But I know what you're saying, Paul.
Excuse me, Chair. I don't feel that I'm stonewalling. We act in accordance with the law, and the prescription came from the UK government. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think the last question I have notified is from Katharina.
Thank you very much, Chair. You, DCC Connors, you have already provided some of the information I was seeking in your answers to Tom and to Mary around that balancing the day-to-day operation, day-to-day policing with large-scale protests. And obviously this summer we've had a number of significant events through the operations that you cover in the report as well. And we did talk about the trend of increasing protests. And I know you have given some assurances around the day-to-day operations continue and the implications on the budget. I just wanted to press you a little bit more on this though, because I know we are hearing assurances from you, and I have confidence in Police Scotland being able to manage resources appropriately. But at the same time, this is an increasing trend. And I was wondering, how do we get more than an assurance that you are deploying resources? So from a performance perspective, Are there any metrics that we might see? They're either, from our detection rates, etc., they're either staying steady, they're dropping. So how quickly will we know that you are managing to balance the day-to-day with the protests, or how quickly will we know that actually it isn't working and there is a deterioration in performance? Because from my experience, you can only sustain increased demand for so long before something has to give. And whilst I have confidence in your ability to do that for a period of time, at some stage, as an assurance, from an assurance perspective, I would like to understand how soon will we know that it's actually not working and we need more people, we need more resources, and we need to do something differently. So I've got 2 questions, so that's the first question.
Thank you. It's a very important point, and if I take it in a couple of parts, which is, the pressure on our staff is really felt. The Federation, our staff associations and our, colleagues will constantly feed in, and it isn't just a case of anecdote and just repeating it. We're absolutely acutely aware that we are putting continued pressure on staff in a whole number of areas, in different areas. If you look at things like the serious and organised crime space with Operation Portledge, again, significant pressure on our serious and organised crime teams, our intelligence analysts, our higher threat capabilities over the summer in particular. And it doesn't look like that type of behaviour is going to abate either. I think in terms of when you look at performance, we obviously monitor performance regularly. We look at our different crime types, our different crime groups. We do look at our detection rates in particular as well, because that will tell us the pace and timeliness of investigation and where officers can actually invest their time in the investigation elements of it. We look at our response times to not just from our C3 colleagues answering calls, but actually our ability then to get to call. So all of those metrics we look at. We obviously have our quarterly performance. At the moment, the quarter one, which will have gone up till June, we're still maintaining effective performance, but we're starting to see the pressures, and I think quarter 2 will probably reflect some of those pressures more acutely. I'd just like, again, to play compliment to our staff with the hard work they put in. But to reiterate to your question, we do monitor it through performance. We look at the detection rates. We look at the timeliness of investigations. We look at our response time. So it's a very holistic view to understand what those pressures are having on the organisation. I don't know whether Katie wants to come in particularly from a staff point of view.
As I say, more broadly as well, we've obviously got a number of insights around workforce. So through the People Committee, we have workforce dashboards, and we will always be looking at indicators in relation to that. So colleague engagement survey results, which are obviously due from the latest survey. We'll look at absence rates, reasons for absence, number of occupational health referrals, injury on duty, and also our ability to be able to recruit and retain both officers and staff. So there's a number of indicators that we'll look at within the workforce as well.
Thank you for that. My second question is on a slightly different, is on a different topic. So, and that's in relation to the Crime Stoppers police integrity line. I suppose that is relates to the recent Audit and Risk Committee conversation we had around whistleblowing. Again, that Mary has obviously covered a little bit earlier today. So, I welcome that Police Scotland is now part of the Crime Stoppers police integrity line. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more information around that, because the way I read this is another route to report concerns, but again, from a whistleblower's perspective, it's incredibly important, the support that is provided throughout as well. So I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit more on the Crime Stoppers service as to whether it is primarily around reporting, whether there is any wraparound support, and again, how you will see the effectiveness of the service going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think internally we have a number of measures in place that would allow officers and staff to raise concerns within the organisation. What we've always been acutely aware is what are the opportunities for members of the public more broadly to raise concerns about officer behaviour or action, and to try and do that in a way in which the public have a confidence. So the introduction of the Crime Stoppers line, which is an extension of the provision which Crime Stoppers already provides, not only in Scotland, but across the UK. So this provides an additional opportunity for the public primarily to raise concerns about the actions or behaviours of officers whilst on duty. It was introduced a little bit quicker across England and Wales, and I think one of the things that we want to do is just to evaluate that service, and are there ways in which we can enhance that, market and advertise the service better. So we are in the very early stages of that, and I think we would want to bring some reports back through the Complaints and Conduct Committee as to the progress of that provision.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've now got Angela wishing to come in.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for the report and the really full and frank answers from the team. Can I just ask a wee bit about human trafficking? And I notice in the Chief Constable's report that the successful operations have taken place in Glasgow and Dundee, but she also points out that this is a blight on our communities beyond these two cities. I know, and you've already mentioned this, the work with partners, but I just wonder whether there is any further work planned or ongoing that you want to expand on in terms of how human trafficking is being dealt with in our communities, and whether or not there are any intentions for greater publicity just to bring our citizens up to speed or create greater awareness of this crime and how it impacts on people in different communities across Scotland.
Apologies, I'll offer an opportunity if any of my colleagues want to come in. I think it's a really important area, and it's one that we've been focusing on. It doesn't get a lot of kind of publicity or coverage, but again, it's an element of crime that is absolutely horrific, and the impact on victims is considerable, as you'll be aware. I think one of the main things for us is around being able to look at it from the higher end high threat, which is where it sits at the moment in some of our specialist teams, but it's being able to bring that down into the local level, because we can track through some of the serious and organised crime groups who run the trafficking networks, and they're able to put that, they're the ones that make the money out of these processes. However, it very much links down into our local communities and our local areas. So for us, I think the focus going forwards is, as you say, much more citizen awareness of the types of things that you might see. We talk about nail bars, we talk about car washes, we talk about different things. I'm not sure it necessarily resonates perhaps in the way that it should, and we can bring it to life. So for me, working with partners, the further work is very much, and again, this links to the Policing for Our Communities local policing model, which is so important, because that visibility of local officers, that intelligence with local officers, means that we can tackle it at that end, identify where it is and what's happening, as well as going after those who are actually orchestrating it from a serious and organised crime element. And that is something that we're looking to broaden out far more across the organisation. And I think it's already been mentioned about our organisational learning aspects. That is something we're really keen on. Where is best practice and how do we share that?
Yeah. Just a couple of points. I think in Police Scotland, we have a human trafficking task force, and a lot of forces aren't able to provide that capability, and we are extremely grateful for the officers and staff that work in there. They do a really tough job. And I think this particular area is a really difficult area of crime because the victims are hidden. And so accessing support from third sector here is really important, and we've got some really strong relationships with those partnerships across Scotland and wider. And probably for me, I'd point to the relationship with Santa Marta in terms of international work that we do. We are really fortunate to be a key partner in that, and we get a lot of intelligence and information through that particular network. I think that's been a key element of understanding some of the patterns of human trafficking. The work we have with the NCA is really important as well to understand more broadly the international reach and how that affects and impacts Scotland. But I think to DCC Connor's point that the local footprint is really important here. If you can balance the information from the communities, and again, this brings us back to putting officers at the heart of our communities to understand what's happening and get that information and intelligence. You then link that with the international elements of that, supported by our covert capability, which again, we are exceptionally grateful to have within Police Scotland, and a lot of forces don't have that. So if you put those three elements together, I think our partnership approach is really important. It's an area that we would need to invest in moving forward. We know that. And again, that links to the investment that's needed in the covert capability more broadly across Police Scotland. If we were able to do that, we would be able to find more and bring victims forward and support them more. So, thank you.
Okay, Thank you very much indeed. DCC Connors, I think that is the end of questioning from the for the Chief Constable's report, so thank you very much indeed, and thank you members for these fulsome questions. I'm going to now hand over to the Chief Executive to speak to her report.
Thank you, Chair. I will take my report as read. However, as the Deputy Chief Constable Designate has already mentioned, there has been agreement on the officer pay since my report was submitted, and this is a significant milestone, and I'm very grateful to all those involved in the PMBS for their commitment to the negotiations and reaching an early resolution on this 2-year agreement. The staff pay offer, which mirrors that offered and accepted by officers, is being put to a consultative ballot of trade union members, and a majority need to accept the offer for agreement to be reached. And I appreciate, Chair, we will be picking this item up later on in the agenda. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much indeed for your report, which people would look to be content with, and obviously there's going to be a lot of dialogue about the 26-27 budget in the coming weeks and months for that. I'm now going to hand over to our Forensic Services Director, Fiona Douglas, for her report, please, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Forensic Services remains in a stable financial position, with the Q1 forecast setting out a broadly break-even position for the revenue budget to the end of the financial year. There continues to be a strong demand for forensic services, particularly in relation to supporting ongoing organised crime investigations such as Operation Portalage, and in managing increased demand in relation to drug driving. Work is ongoing with Police Scotland colleagues, building on the pilot undertaken in Shetland to develop a plan that will allow the further rollout of roadside drug testing to local policing officers, taking into account available in-house and outsourced analysis capacity, alongside providing assurance on affordability. The ongoing project to develop the full business case for a long-term sustainable model for the delivery of criminal toxicology services will ensure that there is sufficient in-house capacity to manage the future demand for analysis of drug driving samples. This work is ongoing. It continues to be a priority area to focus to reduce the number of serious injuries and fatalities on the roads of Scotland where drugs are a contributing factor. Moving on, in June, the Westminster Commission published a report on forensic science in England and Wales, titled Pulling Out of the Graveyard Spiral. The report sets out its diagnosis of a deep crisis in forensic science in England and Wales, which it attributes to policy shifts since 2012. The report makes 34 recommendations highlighting risks of bias in the commissioning of forensic science, alongside the collapse of some forensic science disciplines. The Westminster Commission visited forensic services at our laboratory at the Scottish Crime Campus in Gartcosh earlier this year, prior to the publication of their report, which highlighted to them the different model of forensic science delivery in Scotland in comparison to the police privatised, market-driven model in England and Wales. Our model of delivery of forensic science in Scotland was cited in the report as publicly governed, multidisciplinary and scientifically rigorous in comparison to the fragmentation and decline laid out in England and Wales. There are a range of areas highlighted in the report where forensic services will continue to work with colleagues across the forensic community in the United Kingdom to drive improvement, innovation and best practice, alongside detailed consideration in relation to learning that can be taken to further improve our delivery of forensic science in Scotland into the future. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Paul, is there anything you want to add or
Yes,
comment
just
on?
two things. I think the work on Operation Portalage, I think, has been very significant and has put a strain on the service in the sense that there is a lot of additional work, and that means that performance is going to dip in other areas, and we just have to be cognizant of that and understand that. So the committee has been teed up for that for the next performance reports. And the other thing I would just touch on is the excellent development session that we had in June, which there was a number of members of the committee were able to attend, and that was really useful in teasing out a number of strategic issues going forward. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got Angela coming in. All right, okay, thank you. Mary?
I think the chair of the committee and the director are perhaps slightly too modest today. We have a lot to be proud of with our forensic services, and I remember my own induction a number of years ago being thoroughly impressed by a visit to Gartcosh, and more recently the development session that the chair referred to at Moore Park was also extremely impressive. And so the importance of maintaining the quality of that service, the integrity and independence of the service, and its high reputation, not just in the UK but much wider than that, is really something we have to be particularly careful to protect, I think.
Thank you for that. It's sometimes just worth a bit of reflection. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Tom?
Thanks very much, and I commend the work that's been done for forensic science in Scotland, and the model that is obviously receiving recognition. The demands of just going to a pure market model are becoming very evident in other areas. There's been a huge investment in forensic services in Scotland, and we reap the benefits. But one of the aims was also to bring the benefits of forensic science to volume crime investigations. I'm just asking about the progress being made in that. When the demand from serious crime is so critical and immediate, it's easy not to get to the volume crime, but that's where it's really important for most citizens in Scotland.
Thank you, Tom. And I think that the Forensic Services Strategy, both the previous one and the one that was approved just very recently, sets out absolutely the need to use forensic science carefully and to add value in acquisitive crime and Group 3 crime, volume crime investigations, where it can offer both a very efficient and swift detection in some of those more high volume in investigations. So with our new operating model in forensic services, we're starting to see the benefits of the changes that we have implemented over the last 2 years. We still have work to do, particularly around improving the speed at which forensic intelligence results are provided to colleagues in Police Scotland to allow them to investigate those types of crime. So there's lots of positive progress in terms of growing capacity to allow more forensic science work to be done in that area, and also to allow less impact when we do see growth in other policing operations such as Operation Portalage.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments or questions on that? Thank you. So we're now going to take a short break. We are ahead of time, so and we're waiting on Mr. Naylor coming through from Edinburgh. So at the moment, I'm going to ask us to come back at 11:45. Thank you. quarterly financial performance report and hand over to James Gray, our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief in my comments. This paper was discussed at length at the Resources Committee last week. But what you have here is the year-to-date position up to the 30th of June and a forecast for the remainder of the financial year. Just picking up on revenue, the forecast at the moment is to be on track to deliver a balanced budget, and therefore the kind of status is green on that. What I would say, just having looked at the period 4 figures and related to the conversation earlier on, is that we did see an overspend again come through on overtime in period 4 and the buyback of toil, which was £500,000, as was discussed earlier on, which relates to the month of April. So we're now doing some detailed analysis to see what we might start to expect coming through over the summer months. But there still remains some contingency left in overtime, albeit it has been quite depleted over the course of the summer. So that will be a focus, I think, particularly in the next finance report that comes forward, just around the deliverability status. But in the overall context of the revenue budget, it isn't a material number, but it's certainly something that needs to be managed and closely monitored for the rest of the financial year. Then picking up on capital, we are showing a amber delivery status at the moment. We are slightly behind the profiling of the capital budget and have spent 11.3 million at the end of the first quarter. What I would say again is, having looked at the period 4 figures for capital, we are now starting to see an uptick in spend. So at the end of July, we were at £15.6 million, so a fairly good month in the month. And when you exclude fleet, to understand the underlying position, because this time last year we had spent quite a lot of money on fleet in the overall context of the capital. This year, not so much. So when you look at the capital spend to the end of July, without fleet, we were at £7.3 million last year, and we're at £14.2 million this year. So actually, the non-fleet capital spend is at double the level it was at this time last year. And a component part of that, a big component part, has been estates, where there has been a bit of a slow start. But again, in period 4 in July, we've seen £2.8 million worth of spend. So if you look at that on an annualised run rate, that's over £30 million a year, which is a long way ahead of where that estate spend has ever been. So again, looking at the status of amber, I think that's right. It needs to be monitored very carefully for the rest of the year. But actually, I've got a high degree of confidence that you will see, you know, that kind of very high 20s of millions of pounds in estates being spent, and that the full capital will be delivered on budget. And then finally on reform, again, no concerns there. It's on green for deliverability status. I think that that should be fine for the remainder of the year. So again, just to summarise, I think the focus needs to be on overtime and toil related to that kind of pressure on the operational side, but that will be monitored going forward. And I'll leave it there. Thanks. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed for that analysis, James, and also picking up, obviously, I think two things that are about service delivery. One, the pressure on the workforce, but actually the importance of improving our estate in terms of working conditions for staff. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Pauline as Chair of Resources Committee for comments.
Thanks, Chair. And as James has said, we had a detailed discussion at the Resources Committee last week on this. Just with regard to the amber issue of capital, we did ask for a pipeline of future programmes for the rest of the year to provide further assurance to the authority, and that was agreed by the Executive. On the revenue side, as James said, it is sitting at green at the moment. However, there are significant pressures, and we've heard about some of those today, in terms of increasing demand on policing and on forensic services through a range of areas in Scotland, and the impact of wider issues here in our local communities. We also spoke about the need to ensure that the implementation of savings were carried out on a recurring basis to fund workforce modernisation, and it would be helpful to hear a bit more about progress with those.
I can take that one. So this is a really complex area in terms of understanding. While we are beholden to an officer number target, we know we want to be able to bring in the right skills and capabilities in terms of police staff positions. So balancing that has been really complicated, and actually moving away from an officer number target would give us the ability to say, these are the skills and capabilities we need to bring into the organisation, and these are the areas that we need them to be. We're not there at the moment. So what we're having to do is understand, how do we bring police staff into the organisation, proof of concept, workforce modernisation. We've done that and we know it works, and we want to keep those individuals. So behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of work around what are the efficiencies we can make so that we can keep those police staff and bring more police staff into the organisation to move the officers from the back office functions onto the front line, is the plan that we're working on at the moment. So my team are working through an efficiencies and benefits plan, which we'll bring forward next week and we'll bring to the budget meeting that we have, just to show you some of the efficiencies we've already made, but also the plan for future efficiencies as we move further forward. But I think it's really clear to articulate that actually that workforce mix would give us the ability to protect the communities of Scotland in a different and more effective way, as opposed to training police officers to do something that we know somebody in a different sector could come in and do and hit the ground running in a much more effective and capable way. So thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Angela?
Thank you. Thanks, James. And thank you for the update. I was going to ask about capital. Pauline's covered a bit of it, but I just wondered, and I really welcome the introduction of the capital planning task force. I think that's a really useful introduction. In terms of capital, though, and the dependency on estates, I just wondered as well about what assurance you could give us about the prioritisation of the work plan and the allocation of resources against each of those individual projects.
Yeah, so I'll start on this and I can speak about the current year. So we're in a transition year from what we've previously done with regard to the estate, which is very much just focused on patching up buildings to keep them operational, to having that more strategic view from the strategic asset management plan that we've called the master plan. And what that's allowed us to do is identify the buildings that we're going to retain. And so that they're the priorities for investment, and amongst those, of which there are over 100, identified which are the ones that are most in need, and that's been done in conjunction with operational police officers from the kind of operational need perspective, but also from our estates professionals who have condition survey data and know which ones are actually from a building condition are in most in need, and through that have come up with a prioritised list. And there are 11 buildings across the country, operational police buildings, that will see upgrades to their interiors, to where most of the officers and staff would spend their time when they're on duty, which should hopefully have a real positive impact on wellbeing. But as I say, that's been done in conjunction with operational need and the technical data to do that. But moving forward, there will need to be consideration around profiling of major projects that get taken ahead. Where we've got to so far on the journey from the kind of the very high level strategic asset management plan is that we know Glasgow and the West in particular, Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Renfrewshire and Inverclyde and Tayside are the areas that are most in need of modernisation, both operationally because the buildings are not fit for modern policing and don't fit with the revised model of policing that's coming through, but also are at end of life or close to end of life, and actually investment in those buildings is what we've previously referred to as regret spend. But obviously that work will continue around the major projects and the prioritisation of those, but they'll be done in conjunction with the overall change programme.
Just on that, when I started this portfolio, one of the things I thought were exceptionally important was to have a high-level plan which included all of the change and transformation within Police Scotland, the digital transformation, the data work that we're doing, the investment in data science, but a key part of that is the estates transformation work. So understanding what does that look like, not least in terms of spend, but also the profile and how that overlaps with the Policing for Our Communities work, for example. So at the moment, we're in the position where we've got operational leads who are inputting kind of business requirements. James has recruited an estates chief officer who will start with us, who will support us with the next phase of planning in terms of what does that look like for us as an organisation. We need to make some key strategic decisions in terms of what we do first and when, but I'm really keen to do that alongside all of the other transformation that's happening at the moment. We know that all of these things need to be done in the right sequence to be able to make the best impact in terms of where we invest first in our estates footprint. So At the moment, that work is ongoing, and again, as I say, we've had a good discussion as an executive in terms of next steps and direction, and we'll make sure that the authority are briefed in terms of plans as we move forward. But just to reassure you, it's built into the main transformation plan because it is such a big part of what we need to do moving forward in terms of providing the right estate footprint for our officers and staff.
Thank you. That's really reassuring to hear, and I think it is about the dependencies on other services as well. So estates, obviously, the skill set needs to be there, but there will be a number of other services where a different set of professionals will be required as well. So that prioritisation of their work is really critical. So thank you.
Any other questions from other board members, Tom?
On the point of estates, we know we're going to have a pilot area in Clackmannanshire around a more community-based model of policing. Look forward to that, and hopefully that there'll come what the need is for a community hub type facility. When would you expect us to have more detail on what a community hub would be, so that we can build that into the forward planning and the requirements of the estate?
Yeah, so as we know, our pilot for policing for our communities will go live in mid-September. We're lucky in the sense that on the Forth Valley Division, they have a number of good buildings and a good community structure to start with. But for us, it's about developing that and understanding what that looks like as part of the estate's master plan. One of the commitments we've made is that we'll do engagement with communities, because we know the broad aspects across Scotland of rural, remote and more urban. So it will look slightly different in different areas. But to reassure you, it's part of the estate's master plan. We expect to see that in the next sort of 4 or 5 months to be consolidated with what the concept looks like. And then it will move, how does that apply to all of the different divisions? Because it will look slightly differently and would need to, because we need to respond to the communities and the differences of Scotland. I don't know if there's anything else. Okay, thank you.
And sorry, is there a timescale for that in terms of, so when will we know?
So we go live with our pilot division at the end of September. That will give us a better sense of what our communities need and how the model works. I think in 4 to 5 months we'll have a better concept of what the actual design may look like, but it will need to fit into the estate's master plan. And as I say, the complexities of Scotland means we need to be able to manage that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I've just got a couple of queries then. In terms of in the Forensic Service Director report, she talked about delays of being able to move forward with a capital programme as a consequence of lack of resources. And it's, I think, within the quarterly finance report, it talks about needing more resources to deliver on the estates programme. How confident are we that these resources, so there's a couple of things in terms of what means that we've not had the resource, has there been a problem, but also in practical terms, what are we going to do about resolving that so that we can move forwards with these both very important cases?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start and others may want to come in. I mean, the point I would make around this is it's been a real challenge over a number of years, as many board members know, to deliver what has been a year-on-year growth in capital. And you know, that's not, you know, I'm not saying that as a negative. It's a positive that we've seen an increase in capital over the years. But what it has meant is the fact that the allocations are only announced by government in the lead up to Christmas. There's a kind of 12-week lead-in time until you then have to make sure you've got the resources to absorb another uplift. So in the current year, we're somewhere around about £10 million more than we were in the previous year, which is great. But what that then means is you need to make sure there's the resourcing model in place to do that. And as I said earlier on in the States, that there was a slow start and now we're catching up. Well, we're catching up because we've managed to just bring in 4 construction project managers to support us. But we're not bringing them in until we know there's actually the money there to do the work. So, I mean, I think it goes back to that point around multi-year allocations of capital would allow us to bring the resources. And it's not necessarily that the money's not there to do it. It's just that until you know you're going to have the availability of the funding, you don't have the people. But what has happened through the Capital Task Force since the spring is it has been some additional resources gone into areas like procurement so that they can handle an increased volume of spend, and as I say, into estates and other areas, digital and so on. With regards to the future of estates, what I meant in the report was that to move even from 20 or 30 million a year up to 60 or 70 million a year, which is the ambition that, you know, probably in all likelihood will need some kind of delivery partner just because of the scale of that, and those costs in all likelihood could be capitalised, which helps, but we haven't got them yet, so we can't, and again, we don't know what the allocation will be for 26, 27, so we're not in a position even to pull the trigger to go and bring in a partner, because we don't know what the shape of the programme looks like, because we don't know what the funding is. So that just reinforces that point around the need to really try and get some clarity over, you know, at least 2 or 3 years ahead, so we can get a real programmatic approach to capital spend.
Can I just add a couple of points that I think what James articulates is absolutely correct in terms of, because of the annualised nature of our budgeting, we are having to continually reprioritise, and I've referenced in Resources Committee the struggle that we have in terms of we've got an ambitious programme to deliver 2030, rightly so, and we want to be able to deliver that. But because of the way that we are budgeted for, often we have to make the decision to bring temporary staff in or release temporary staff to be able to support the various programmes and projects that we have on the go. And I think it's not an effective way of working. And if we were able to have an understanding of what the long-term financial planning would look like in terms of financial arrangements and budget, we would be able to work within our means in terms of that. I'm continually asking my transformation team and my digital teams to stop and start pieces of work, which can be quite frustrating in terms of being able to deliver. And sometimes you will see delays in terms of some of the work that we want to do and some of the delivery times, purely because of the way we're having to stop and start due to financial arrangements. So from my perspective in transformation, that's a really key point.
Okay, that's really helpful, thank you. The one final question I then have is about cash releasing efficiency savings for this financial year, and at the beginning of the year, or even further than that, we talked about having additional, in terms of workforce modernisation, civilianisation of our workforce, bringing staff in, needing to be, that resource needing to be secured. I wondered if you could see what progress we're making. That was just an example. I recognise that there's other efficiency savings that need to be made. I wonder what progress we're making in terms of cash releasing efficiency savings in the budget this year.
We are making progress, and that's the report that I referred to that we'll bring to the Budget Development Group next week. We are working through the savings we've already made. I won't go into those here just because we're working through the final numbers and also the future plans in terms of savings. I think probably really important to highlight that it's not just about people in terms of headcount and where we've moved people around the organisation. This is about the digital capability that we're giving officers and staff, the time that we're giving our officers and staff back, and the ability for them to work a normal shift as opposed to working hours longer because they're trying to keep up with the pace and the demand that we're seeing in terms of increase. So I'll bring that forward, Chair, next week in the Budget Development Group for you to see the detail behind.
Thank you very much. Look forward to that. Any other comments or questions on the finance report? No. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to move on to our agenda item 9. Mr. Naylor, thank you so much for being with us, in particular today when I know that you need to be in 2 places, probably at more than one, less than one time, but both Edinburgh and Glasgow and back to Edinburgh. So very grateful to you for being with us, because that third-party assurance from an authority point of view is incredibly important. So welcoming Craig Naylor to join us today to speak to the HMICS annual report, which was published yesterday, and I'll hand over to Mr. Naylor to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Sorry for the late publication of the report. We managed to get it out just in time for you to have a brief look at it beforehand. So I won't go through every point, but I do want to make some comments about where we are in the year and what a success Police Scotland has delivered, particularly with the visits of both the President and Vice President of the United States. Planning that at such short notice and delivering it so successfully is a real testament to how the organisation is operating just now, and something we've been aware of from previous events, but also monitor very closely. You've done that at a time of the Edinburgh Festival, when you've had 200,000 Oasis fans coming to Murrayfield. You've got another 70,000 at AC/DC tonight. You've had a huge tourist influx into Edinburgh and to the rest of the communities across Scotland. You've had the Royal Week. You've had the challenge of keeping business as usual going when staff and officers are off on holiday. And you've had 55 arrests on Operation Portaledge. You've had the convictions of McGovern, Heaps, Bald, names from my past, to be honest, last week, and the convictions over 90 years of service. I think what I'm trying to say is the pace at which Police Scotland operates is quite phenomenal. And I know we've heard from other partners in recent months that the delivery of the Portaledge operation has been exceptional and has been done to a very high standard. So I wanted to play a particular comment around that at the start of what is last year's annual report, but nothing stands still in policing. A number of highlights in my report stick out, and we have done a lot of work over the last year, and we've issued a lot of recommendations. I do know that that is a real challenge to the service and to the SPA, but what I would say is the team under Angela do exceptionally well in driving business areas to deliver against recommendations. Some real highlights, though, for us. The missing persons work last year showed that Police Scotland treat people who are missing in a very effective manner and recover the majority of them very, very quickly. That is a challenge, and that is a challenge that I think is delivered very effectively. Road policing at a time of increasing road deaths is a challenge, and we're keen to see the production of a report and a plan to make improvements in that space, but we recognise the challenges of budgets and making changes at pace. We continually see in the Children at Risk of Harm and the Adult Support and Protection reports we do with the Healthcare Improvement Scotland and with the Care Inspectorate significant evidence of partnerships in local communities that are delivered very, very effectively. And we see the growing influence of the National Public Protection scrutiny work that is coming to the fore in the last year under the chair of the Chief Executive of Aberdeen Council. That is something that we see as very much aligned to the CRERA principles, and seeing inspection and scrutiny as being effective at raising standards across the whole country, across all of the partnerships. We're also very happy to see the SPA validated self-assessment last year, and one recommendation coming out of that, which was to take cognizance of the areas for development. I'm aware, Chief Exec, that we have seen that evidence this week, and I hope to be signing that off next week as a concluding recommendation. The Chief Constable previously has talked about ongoing reform and reform part 2. We are very pleased with the work that is going on with that, and the real challenges around the right workforce mix, which DCC Smith has mentioned this morning, or this afternoon as it now is, apologies. But doing that is like changing the engine on a jumbo jet mid-flight. So we do recognise the challenges, the budgetary challenges that go with that, and how that is being managed. In the past year, we have consulted on our next 3-year scrutiny plan. That scrutiny plan had significant input from everyone around this table, and we're very grateful for that. And our next 3 years will focus on a number of areas: Commonwealth Games, domestic abuse, crime audits, operational support division, violence against women and girls, major crime, policing the community, and serious organised crime, just to touch on some of the areas. All of these things are crucial to the communities of Scotland and crucial to the efficacy of Police Scotland and the SPA and SPA forensics as a whole. We get great cooperation from policing, from SPA, from Police Scotland, from SPA forensics in the way we do our work, and we're very grateful for that. We do have our moments when we disagree on things, but I think that creative tension is worthwhile. But to be fair, Chair, I see a force that is delivering to a very high standard, a force that is going through a best value inspection, and the Auditor General and I spoke this morning about that work. We've briefed the Chief Exec, and we've briefed the Director of Forensics in recent weeks on our emerging findings, and I don't think there was any surprises there. Now, I won't go into the details of that, but I am very happy with the engagement we've had and with the evidence that's been provided to us in that space. So I just, in concluding remarks, I'd like to thank all of the staff that we engage with across all 3 organisations for the professionalism, the candour, the commitment to improvement that we see on a regular basis. But to be honest, I'd like to thank 2 people in particular, and James, you and I have worked together since you arrived here in the crisis days many years ago, but thank you and good luck with your new post. And Lynn, we have grown to know each other quite well over the last few years. Your stabilising influence on the authority over the last few years is exceptional, and I'd like to pay tribute to both of you for the work that you've done, as this will be the last time I get a chance in the public forum to do so. Thank you. And I'll have to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Craig. Any comments or questions on the report? Pauline?
Thank you very much, Craig, for your report and for your opening remarks too. I wanted to mention in your comments in terms of the conclusion on page 8 of the report that the reform journey that policing has been on since it was established, Police Scotland has been on since it was established in 2013, obviously needs to continue given the budgetary challenges. And you also mentioned that change programmes need to be prioritised and some may need to stop or be realigned to the new 2030 strategy. Could you elaborate a bit more on your thoughts on that, please?
You. Absolutely, and it goes back to DCC Smith and James's points about the budget and trying to do things in year. It's something that I've said previously, in year budgeting, particularly capital, and trying to achieve building projects, IT projects and other things are incredibly difficult. The 2030 strategy gives a real ambition for the future, and we're very keen, and we know that DCC Smith is working on this, to align all of the change to either what is lawfully required to be done, so the PECS bill, or the PECS Act as it now is, and the changes that are required to come in around that, or issues that are aligned to the 2030 strategy, so a new workforce model, or indeed things that are just required to keep the operational lights on, so keeping patches on IT systems or keeping kit working at the standard it should do. Anything else, you need to stop doing. But understanding what the anything else is very, very difficult. So we're very keen to, and we're very happy to speak about these things. What is it that you're trying to stop doing? And what is it you're trying to stop spending money on that may have had a significant investment up until this point? If it's not going to add improvement, capability that's not there just now, or meet a legislative requirement, the questions have got to be asked about why is it you're still doing it? We're keen to see that. We're also keen to see a better understanding of the realisation of benefits, and I know that BEX has been working very hard on that, but it's something that we have made comment about many times in the past, and something that we are seeing an emerging capability, which we're very pleased to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got Mary and then Chris.
Yes, there's much to commend in this report, but I was particularly interested to see the reference to work that you're planning to do as part of your scrutiny plan to assess the likely cost and other demands of new legislation. This is an area where we've had discussion in the Audit Committee, and we've discussed with Police Scotland how we get better at being able to say exactly what new legislation will mean for Police Scotland, for forensics, for the authority and for partners as well. It's really important that we don't sleepwalk into legislation, find ourselves with something that we don't have the resource for and that we can't fund or we can't manage. So I think we stand ready to work with you on that, Mr Naylor, and very keen to see that we get improvement in that area. Thank you.
We're very keen to make sure that there is a framework in a place for Police Scotland to influence that in a way that government take on board when they're writing that legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. And thank you, Craig, for your report and your remarks. There's a couple of places in your introduction to the report, which I was particularly interested in. You referred to one of them in your remarks this morning, and that was the partnership working with other inspectorates and the contribution to whole system thinking and working that provides. And you also touch in your introduction to working with Audit Scotland and others in terms of public service reform. And I just wondered if you wanted to say something about the contribution of policing and the scrutiny of policing and the learning from scrutiny of policing to that drive for public service reform, because it's a big agenda ahead.
Thank you. I absolutely agree that, if you go back to the Carrera principles about lighter touch inspection and scrutiny and doing things in a more joined up forum, part of the Scottish Strategic Scrutiny Forum, which I sit on, is trying to look at that and look at whole system approaches in a place-based manner. We are hoping to come out with some work on that at the tail end of this financial year, which would look at how do we do things in a different way, whether that's through the public protection arena or in a wider place-based approach. Without going into too much detail, because the detail isn't there yet, it's more of a concept that we're trying to work on. We're very keen to lighten the load of scrutiny, because we do feel that policing in general is quite heavily scrutinised, and we want to add value. So the scrutiny we want is to be, how does policing fit within the system? How does it sit within the criminal justice system or the local service delivery system? And how do we get to a point that we are assuring communities, whether that's a place-based community or a criminal justice community or whatever else, that the services are working well together, that they are making decisions strategically to spend their money effectively to reduce cost, improve efficiency and improve effectiveness. So, emerging, but we have a good groundwork with Healthcare Improvement Scotland, Care Inspectorate, Prisons, Prosecution and Audit Scotland that we already work with and are producing reports on that. My next ambition is to influence more effectively the Scottish Government around the reform agenda from the reports that we come out with, to use them as a starting point for wider system reform. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Tom, were you wanting to come in? Or? Yeah, please, yeah.
Thanks very much for your report. In it, you reference the increasing pressures on resources and the need to be effective, but also in your public comments recently around the Proceeds of Crime Act, in terms of a benefit from that coming straight back, directly back to, I would say, not just policing, but the prosecution service, etc. It was, which is the case in England and Wales. It was established in Scotland that those monies would go to cash back for communities, and it was addressing directly the harm in communities. Is it your view that because of the critical nature of the harm being caused just now, if you look at the Operation Portalages, the public are all too aware of the impact of serious and organised crime in Scotland, that the time now is that some of these funds should come back to Police Scotland, so that there can be some direct measures to tackle the harm ahead of those other preventative messages?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the asset recovery and incentivisation scheme, which is never easy to say. We used it to great benefit to increase the assets we targeted, and it increased the recoveries we made when I was working in East Midlands. The benefit from that was actually reducing the capability of organised criminals, because you're taking their capital away from them and stop them. My ambition for this in Scotland is that we grow the pot that comes back in through forfeiture and seizure. So instead of £10 or £12 million a year, that we target £25 million a year. The only way to do that, though, is to increase the capability that policing has, that prosecution has, that civil recovery has. It should be a position that there should be no downturn in what cashback for communities get, but there is some investment in forensic accountants, cyber cryptocurrency experts, so the people that can follow the assets that are incredibly well hidden. The NCA do it well. Some of the ROCUs do it well. In Scotland, I don't think we have the investment in the people or the capability to do it. And to do that, it takes away from something else from the front line. Why can we not operate in the same way that our partners do, the NCA do? So, grow the pot. and grow the capability.
Can Tom have a follow-up and then we'll bring you in, Dep Connors?
I think that counter-narrative that it's not about taking money away from cash-back in communities, it is about being more effective at tackling this scourge in society, so thank you.
Dep Connors, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. It follows exactly from Tom's point and the points Craig has already made. Just some of the things that, if the money was able to come into Police Scotland, enhancing our forensic accountancy provisions so we can seize further assets, enhanced analytical support and the capabilities across serious and organised crime. You've already mentioned cryptocurrency, because we need the capability to pursue those hidden funds. It's a very specific skill and it's something we need to be able to invest in. Additional intervention capability, we need to be able to go after the serious and organised crime groups. Particularly increase the capacity of our financial investigators across all divisions, really investing in that so we can find the money, we can find the assets. So, and it's also enabling us to keep in touch with technological advances. You know, DCC Smith has spoken about digital. We know that it's a particularly key area. Criminals will get ahead of us. So rather than just saying, oh, we want money, there's some really specific examples of where we would invest that to be able to tackle the serious and organised crime as a result.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think yeah.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to make a comment on the report.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
It's just to say thank you to Craig and his team. We're grateful for the scrutiny and we're grateful for the constructive nature of it, and we work with them. We're grateful that they recognise the pressures on Police Scotland, but also have spoken about the significant work that's been delivered to a really high standard. Our commitment is to continue to reform, as has been mentioned. We've talked already today about the prioritisation work that is ongoing, the resources that are required and the workforce mix. We've talked about the multi-year capital deals that will support that. We're very much doing evaluation, benchmarking and also benefit articulation, which I know is something we've not been particularly good at, particularly around the savings. And that digital and science elements to it as well. So our commitment to continue to reform, because we want to be able to articulate what we need to be able to keep the communities of Scotland safe. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's been helpful. Mr Naylor, as always, thank you. Thank you for coming in person to speak to us. Thank you for your report. Your encouragement and your challenge, I think, absolutely helps us do a more effective job as the authority. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So we're now moving on to agenda item 12, which has been previously agreed to take in public. So I'll hand straight over to Katie Miller, our P&D Director.
Thank you, Chair. So we've touched upon pay. So in April, we received pay claims from both staff side representing officers and trade unions representing our staff. Subsequently to that, entered into negotiation, and as previously pointed to, we have reached a point where offers were made for 4% 2025-26 and 3.5% for 26-27. We're pleased to say that the staff side have accepted that offer on behalf of officers, and we will make sure that that is backdated into pay for officers in their September pay. So that is all in hand. For staff, our staff through our trade unions, both Unison and Unite are currently balloting their members in relation to that, and we would anticipate an outcome from those ballots around the 11th or 12th of September. Hopefully, if that's a favourable outcome, that then means that we would again be looking to backdate that pay into October. It is a multi-year deal, as touched upon, which for us gives some comfort to our staff, our workforce, around a 2-year deal. It also significantly helps with our budget planning rather than an annual cycle of negotiation. And from my perspective, it gives us a window of opportunity to really be thinking about more strategic approach to total reward. So rather than an annual cycle of pay, we really start to get into the space of some really nice work we can do around what does it mean to work for Police Scotland as an organisation. So base pay being one aspect of that, but much broader than that, what is it that we can offer for our workforce in totality. We've touched earlier that I would like to extend my thanks to the staff side, PMBS, and also our trade unions for what was at times challenging negotiations, but nonetheless were very constructive throughout that period. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any comments or questions for Katie? Pauline?
Thanks very much for that update, Katie. As chair of the PNBS official side, I just wanted to comment on my perspective, which was that the discussions and the negotiations were very constructive, they were purposeful, and they were conducted with pace. So thanks to everybody involved.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think just echoing what Pauline has said in terms of thanks to everyone involved, pleased to see this go through, and I think there are other slight adjustments for next year as well, including increase in full maternity pay to 6 months, which is a welcome addition to support our female members of staff, as well as wider staff members. If there's no further questions, then I'm going to, so thank you very much indeed. But before we conclude today's business, I'd just like to take the opportunity to acknowledge this is the last board meeting for our esteemed Chief Financial Officer, James Gray, who's been with us in the policing family for almost a decade now. James, your contribution to policing cannot be overstated. Delivery of such a high-profile, highly important public service can only be done in a financially stable organisation, and that certainly in terms of your management of the policing budget, your wider contribution to the reform journey, all of which we've talked about today, your support and drive towards continuous improvement, including effective governance and oversight, have been quite inspiring, and we've been very dependent on it, and we are all the stronger and more credible because of that. You're an effective and inspiring leader, and I know that you frequently talk about actually it's a team effort. However, you're leaving footsteps and a legacy, and we'll continue to benefit from this as your team that you've invested development time in will carry on the good work after you leave. So on behalf of the authority, I'd like to thank you for your service, wishing you well in your new role and for the future, and I'm just going to invite, first of all, our Chief Executive and then our Deputy Chief Constable Designate to comment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about the contribution that James Gray, CFO, has made to policing for nearly a decade. James's leadership has seen significant improvements in estates, procurement, fleet maintenance, and a transformation in the finances of Police Scotland. When he took up his post, all these areas were under significant scrutiny from Parliament, from Audit Scotland, HMICS, and they were calling for significant improvements to be made. And because of James' leadership, this has happened. He has taken this organisation from one that had repeated Section 22 reports and the inevitable scrutiny by Parliament to one in which his team won the UK Public Sector Finance Team of the Year for the work they did on COP26. His team continues to deliver a balanced budget with no overspends, despite the financial constraints and the policing demands that continue to grow. It is to James' credit and leadership that he has built a strong team with strength and depth and professionalism. The working relationship between the CFO and the accountable officer is crucial, and because of James's integrity, skill, expertise, and professionalism, this has always been an easy task for me. We at the SPA offer our most sincere best wishes to James in the next stage of his career and thank him for all his hard work over a decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane?
Thank you. I'd just like to echo a lot of that, and on behalf of the Chief Constable, just outline that James has led a significant strengthening of our finance team and fiscal discipline since joining Police Scotland on secondment in 2016 and then as Chief Financial Officer since 2017. Transitioning from structural deficits, modified audit opinions and 7 consecutive Section 22 reports to unqualified audit opinions has been a significant achievement for Police Scotland and policing in Scotland, and it is testament to James's leadership. It reflects major improvements in our financial governance and reporting standards led by James and his team that have strengthened stakeholder confidence, as been outlined here, a prerequisite for successful financial planning and advancing credible advocacy for appropriate funding for policing. This was validated in 2019 with Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA, highlighting that our financial monitoring and reporting is some of the best seen in CIPFA financial management assignments globally. I know that James will always say that it's a team effort and he never puts himself forward, but he is a hugely valued member of the Executive. The Chief Constable and all of the Executive are grateful for his support and his expertise. He will be greatly missed, and we would like to wish him well for the future in his new role. And thank you very much to James.
James, not obligatory, but would you like to say a few words?
I think I have to now. Thank you very much for all the kind words. I suppose from my perspective, it has been a real privilege to be on this journey of reform. It's not always been easy, but it has always been rewarding. And you know, just being at these board meetings now is so different to what it was like in my early days. And just, you know, thanks to the authority for all the support over the years. But it's, you know, as I say, it's a real privilege to come here now and see how well these meetings are run, and just the kind of the scrutiny and support. And I think the balance is better than it's ever been in the time I've been here. And then I suppose also just thanks to colleagues in the executive team. It's you know, it's a pressured environment. There's always things going on, but I think, you know, by and large, we managed to, you know, keep a positive approach around it, and you know, through difficult times. And that there have been many over the last number of years, but as I say, really grateful. And I think the team that's going to continue is in a really strong place. And I think it's about time that somebody comes in and brings in some fresh ideas. And even though I'm an accountant, you know, I've maybe got a little bit of you know, adventure in me, and probably time to pick up a new challenge at the University of Edinburgh. But thank you, and good luck for the future.
James, thank you. We're going to miss you. So that is bringing us to the end of our public meeting. So we're going to pause for a few minutes to allow live stream to end and the